I'll be honest with you. I struggled to find a good and fitting title for today's episode. I've titled it, I Don't Need That Kind of Help. That's not the best title, but it's the only thing I came up with. In fact, I actually developed two outlines for today, and I couldn't decide which one to use. So, seeking some inspiration from the Bible, the book of Gideon, you'll recall that Gideon had a question for God on what to do. And so he did this little test. He said, okay, God, I'm going to put this fleece outside before I go to bed tonight. And when I wake up in the morning, if the fleece is wet from the dew, I will assume the answer is yes or no. I'm paraphrasing here. Well, sure enough, it was wet. And he thought, well, I'm not real sure yet. Here, I'm going to do another test, God. I'm going to put the fleece out tonight. And tomorrow morning, if the fleece is dry, then I'll know the answer is either yes or no, whatever. Go read it. It's about Gideon. I'd Google it. I don't know where it is. So I did similarly, and I went out this morning, and the fleece was gone. So I have no idea. So I'm going to do both. I'm going to do one today and one tomorrow. Today's kind of an introductory, so I've just titled it, I Don't Need That Kind of Help. And, as a coach, what if I approached a player and said, I would like you to serve as captain of the team? What if I were to get a response like, coach, I'll do it until you can find somebody else? What if I received a response like, well, coach, I'm really not a leader. I'm just a facilitator. What if I heard an answer like, well, let me pray about that, coach? Sounds good. Or what if I got an answer to the effect of, I'm not qualified, coach? As you can tell, I have contempt for almost all of those answers. In fact, every single one of them. In fact, if I got an answer like that, I would simply withdraw the offer. That's not leadership. Fortunately, God is more patient with us than I am as a coach. Yet across the land, people are approached and asked to serve in the church. And these very often are the answers that are given to a call to serve. Now, I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but I take it very seriously when engaging someone to serve in a leadership capacity in church. And the reason I think that is relevant is that the Bible says that we are ambassadors for Christ. It says so in 2 Corinthians 5:20. An ambassador is an office of very high distinction. I was going to find a verse, that has something to do with, well, I'll do it until you can find someone else. I Googled and searched and finally gave up. I could not find an instance in the Bible where God called anybody to do something until someone better came along. Now, as for the, I'm not a leader, I'm just a facilitator question. No, you are a leader. If you are called to serve in a leadership capacity, then you are a leader if you're serving in that capacity. The question is, how good of a job are you doing at it? And the Bible has something to say about that if you think I'm being a bit harsh. I was going to put that at the end. Let me scroll down. Here's what the Bible says. In James chapter 3, verse 1, starts out the chapter. Not many of you should become teachers, my fellow believers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. Well, let me pray about it first. Well, that certainly sounds good, doesn't it? You mean to tell me that as a Christian, and you're approached by someone asking you to get involved and be a leader, it never occurred to you in your prayer life up to this point that you should be preparing yourself for service? I think there's fault on both sides. I think that we need to be in prayer that God would use us, so that when that question is asked, we can say, like some other guys have said. For example, Mark chapter 2, verse 14. This is the calling of Levi. Levi's Matthew. Okay. As he walked along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at a tax collector's booth. Yeah, he went to the IRS office to find his disciples. Follow me, Jesus told him. And Levi got up and followed him. What it says. Remember the burning bush? Moses encounters a burning bush. It's God speaking through the burning bush. And God is calling Moses to lead the Israelites out of the enslavement under the rule of the Pharaoh of Egypt. So God says, hey, Moses, you got to do this. Exodus 3, verse 11, Moses says, well, God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh to bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And then God answers. But then Moses comes back in verse 13, says, well, suppose that I go to the Israelites and I say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, well, what is his name? Then what shall I tell them? Well, then God answers that question. Continuing Exodus chapter 4, Moses said, what if they don't believe me or they listen to me and say, the Lord did not appear to you? Well, and God answers that excuse too. And then Moses comes back one more time in verse 10 and said, pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent of speech, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. Well, the Lord gets rid of that excuse, and then Moses, one last Hail Mary attempt to make an excuse to get out of service, get out of leadership. He says, well, pardon your servant, Lord. Please send someone else. Well, as I said earlier, it is a good thing that God is more patient with us than I am as a coach. Okay. I like the way it went in Isaiah 6, chapter 6, verse 8. Isaiah heard a voice from the Lord saying, whom shall I send, and who will go for us? And I said, here am I. Send me. That seems to me to be our calling in no particular order. So, in review, I'll do it until someone else comes along. That is not the calling of church leadership. I'm not a leader, I'm just a facilitator. No, yes, you are a leader. Let's start acting like one. Well, let me think about it and pray about it. Well, that's a great idea. Think about it and pray about it before you're asked. That way, when you're asked, you'll know the answer. And I'm not qualified. I don't think God called anybody that was qualified, but he did qualify everybody that he called. We'll continue this discussion tomorrow. I'll tell you a story about a very, very successful, one of the most successful coaches, high school football coaches in the state of Florida. It's been great sharing time with you today.